Hey YouTube, Kirk here, bringing you guys my Granblue deck profile for standard format for September 2018. Big shout outs to my friend Anthony for helping to put together this deck. This is actually his deck that he's letting me borrow for the deck profile, like I said before in some previous videos with the booster sets that come out for standard. I usually just like to try and build one deck from those sets and then just have my friends help me by providing deck profiles and decks to use for other decks. But the Granblue deck, in case you didn't know, is a protect deck from the champions of the Asia circuit, which whole purpose is to use the drop zone to revive monsters to attack and have beefed up numbers, as well as, obviously providing the protect markers for more defensive strategy as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. Now, sadly, there are only 3 Kirks in this deck, but I would like to run 4, just because it's a very powerful unit to have on your Vanguard in the deck. During your turn, if your drop zone has more than 10 or more cards, this unit gets +5 and an extra critical. And once per turn, you can counterblast 1 and soul blast 1, call a card from your drop zone to rear, and this unit gets +5 until the end of the turn for each grade of that unit. So not only does it provide power for this unit, along with the backup from the first ability that this card has, it also just lets you, grab a unit from the drop zone, just provide more power with as well. Basically, the counter blast and the soul blast provides reason, along with the perfect guard, for the ride and to keep riding this card, just because you'll have to make use of soul, obviously, as well with this card, and consistent counter blasts to make it useful, just to be able to get back whether cards that are killed by your opponent on their turn, or just ones that you need to refill your forces on the field. And I also run 4 Dragon, Undead Skull Dragon. This is a great backup in the deck for sure on rearguard. During your turn, this unit gets +2,000 for each card in your drop zone. Works on Vanguard or rear, and from your hand, this card cannot be normal called, so you have to make sure it's in the drop zone and call it off of other abilities to make use of it. And at the end of the battle that it attacked, you retire this unit. This only goes off when it is on the rear guard, obviously, but I like the 4 number in it. It definitely does help. If you want to take out some other numbers, which I'll show the other backup grade 3 you run, you could take out one of this and one of the backup if you want to run the one common grade 3. It has an extra power revival skill. It doesn't have gift, so it doesn't have imaginary gift protect like the other units we're running, but still a viable option. I can't remember the name of it. If I do, I'll put it in the description, or one of you can comment down below the name of that unit. It's the only other grade 3 in the set, but just as another backup to run, since we do have a higher grade 3 count in the deck because it is a protect deck. But to finish off, I also run the Witchdoctor, negra breech, which if I were to put in the 4th Kirk, I would take out one of these as well for that, and just run 2 of this card. But this one's great because it has imaginary gift protect, and on Vanguard or rear during your turn, if your drop zone has 10 or more cards, it gets +10,000. So attacking for 22 on its own is very powerful. And the other effect is from the drop zone, you can counterblast 2 and call this card to rear. If your Vanguard is grade 2 or greater and was not placed this turn, you may ride this card as stand instead. So from the drop zone, if you set it up with cards like Ruinshade, you can have this as an option to ride 2 if you don't hit your grade 3. So very, very useful in that factor for sure. And that is it for the grade 3s. Like most protect decks, a high grade 3 count for sure. And like I said, if you wanted to run that other grade 3, you could just adjust your numbers for the Undead Skull Dragon, just for that reason alone. But moving on to the grade 2s, I run 4 Ruinshade, your main grade 2, just because it helps to set up the drop zone so well. On Vanguard or rear, when it attacks a Vanguard, you put 2 cards from the top of your deck into your drop zone, and this unit gets +4,000 until the end of that battle. And during your turn, if your drop zone has 10 or more cards, this unit gets +4,000, so +8 in total. Attacking for 17k is quite strong for sure. With the first plus, it's able to just, get over force grade 3s alone, so that is definitely helpful there. But the put 2, with each attack that goes through with Ruinshade, you just have more and more cards put into the drop zone to set up what are the main plays and setups you'll need for the deck, obviously. And I also run 4 Captain Night Mist. With this, when placed, you counterblast 1 and call grade 1 or less from your drop zone to rear. If your drop zone has 10 or more cards, you may call regardless of the grade. So just setting up for that 10 early game and then benefiting late game. Definitely it does help with the Captain Night Mist. All it has to do is be placed, so even if you call it with like Kirk, if you have the counterblast to spare, you can then just, use this effect and then just fill up your field very easily from the drop zone for sure. So this and Ruinshade are definite for us, just because this helps with calling and Ruinshade helps with setting up the drop zone that you call from. And lastly, for the grade 2s, I run 3 Commodore Blue Blood. During your turn, if you have a Commodore Blue Blood in your drop zone, this unit gets plus 4,000. And when the attack hits a Vanguard, you retire this unit, draw 2 cards, and discard a card from your hand. So you're building up that drop zone with Commodore Blue Blood as well. It's a rear guard only effect, so not too great when you have to ride this card, like if you were to ride Ruinshade, which is the grade 2 you want to ride most of the time. But still, that power option on rear definitely does come in handy. But like I said, not the best card when you have to end up riding it for sure. And moving on to the grade 1s, I run 4 Dandy Guy Romario. If your drop zone has 10 or more cards, this unit gets plus 4,000. That is a rear guard only effect, making it a very vital and viable option to call off of Night Mist, just because of the 9 with Night Mist alone. Most of the time can't hit too well, but if you are boosting with a 12, attacking for 21, makes for a much better number. And then when rode upon, you can counterblast and put a card from your hand into your soul. Put 3 cards from the top of your deck into your drop zone. Return 1 card from your drop zone to your hand. So it makes up for the fact that you have to, put a card from your hand to the soul, which definitely does help, but this card immensely helps with your drop zone setup, making it a definite 4 of, because you want to ride Dandy Guy Romario most of the time, so you can make use of this. With that and, obviously Ruinshade, you are halfway to having 10 cards in your drop zone just to set up for Kirk's main first effect, which puts on pressure each and every turn against your opponent. So definite 4 of Romario in the deck. And also, I run 4 Dancing Cutlass. This card from the drop zone, you bind another Dancing Cutlass from your drop zone, put the top card of your deck into your drop zone, and call this card to rear and countercharge 1. Now, with all the counterblasting you're doing with cards like Kirk, this card definitely does help Kirk, and Night Mists makes this deck very counterblast heavy, so having cards like Dancing Cutlass, yes, it is a 6k, but just that call option definitely does come in handy, and just the counter charge as well puts it where, you can just get your resources back to reuse, so having it at a 6k isn't that big of an issue in the long run. And I also run 2 Evil Shade. This is the biggest card I had debated on how many of this I wanted to run, but I stuck to 2 just because it is kind of limited to how you play it. You counterblast 1 and bind a card from your drop zone and call a card with the same card name as the card bound for this card from your drop zone to your rear. Now, you have to have a pretty big drop zone to hit consistency with this. It works great when you have, cards like triggers that you've guarded with or used or healed multiple times, and you have that option to call. But most of the time, it's not limited any other way. You just have to have those cards in the drop zone, which, either if it's in your soul, if you wrote it as your main, if it's in your damage, that situation can be tricky when it comes up. But still very viable because it's an easy call from your drop zone to make use of. And lastly, for the grade 1s, I run 2 Norman the Ghosty. You retire this unit and put 2 cards from the top of your deck into your drop zone, and one of your other units gets plus 10,000 to the end of the turn. So once again, great pressure for sure with this card. It sets up your drop zone, which is, like I've been talking about this whole entire video, the main aspect of the deck for sure. But just being able to have that pressure, whether it be for Night Mist if you don't have the boost option, available to you, or maybe you use the call from Night Mist to call another unit, since it said call regardless of the grade if you have 10 or more in the drop. This card's power boost definitely can come in handy for having units just being able to hit your opponent's Vanguard. And that is it for the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s, run 1 Guiding Zombie. This is your starter, obviously, like most decks that you run, just because of the when row upon draw effect. And for the trigger lineup, the biggest thing, which I went with ratio, is just how many crits I wanted to run 2 draws. But I decided to stick with the 8 critical, just because most of the time with your mill, you'll hit a lot of triggers, but the pressure alone with Kirk makes me want to run 8 critical alone to be worth it. So 4 Night Spirit and 4 Mortal Mimic for the critical lineup. And I also run for your heal, obviously, which is the famous Rick the Ghosty for this as well. And then for your draw trigger, I run 4 Gustion. It's the perfect guard, like most decks, pretty stable to run in the deck just because of that factor alone. If you wanted to run more draws, I would recommend maybe between 1 and 2 additional ones to swap out some of the criticals for, but I try to stick to the same names just because of cards like Evil Shade. When it comes to their bind effect, you want to not run one-ofs just because it'll definitely, you know, counteract if you have that one card in your drop zone, and really would have helped if you wanted to get that card out. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. With this deck finished, we are now caught up with all of the standard deck profiles until Champions of AL4, which I'm also definitely excited for, so look forward to that. Until then, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and until next time, Kira Qualia out.